We're on Let's Talk About Lacan Part 3. So this is the third week that we've been exploring that. I'm waiting for Meticulous Prime to log on. I hope you guys have had a good week. Um, I know that the world's going crazy, but I think we're accustomed to that by now. And I just have to promise you that it will get crazier. But we're going to look at this week. We're looking at Lacan. Again, we've dealt with the registers in the past 2 weeks. And this week we're really going to go into some strong applications of the use of the registers. We're going to have to add some other things as we go, but we'll be looking at the registers and looking at this in a way that allows us to understand the individual, the institutional, and the nation. Okay, so in a way, won't be so much talking about geopolitics, which is often what I talk about, but how the psychology of the political actually is the ground from which the the geopolitical is shaped, and that is not because everybody talks about the rational actor, and I think that by the time we're finished, you're going to understand that the rational actor analysis only tells part of the story. It doesn't capture that human fullness, and because it doesn't do that, it often misunderstands, misrecognizes what people are doing and why. So I'm just waiting for Meticulous. I don't want to get too started into this before he gets on, so we can continue. He's got a bit of a cough, so you have to bear with him a bit. But yeah, that's what we're going to be looking at this week. As of course, as I wait for him, I can't see your messages because that's just turning around the bottom. And yeah, let me just check and make sure. So um, yeah, so I think just to recap while I wait is that Lacan talks about three registers, right, which are about how our experience in the world is ordered in a way you could say. It's so we've got the real, which is the thing that is unsymbolizable. Then we have the symbolic, which is the side that is symbolizable. We can talk about it. We can talk about it in language. We can symbolize it in language. So, and then there's the imaginary. That the imaginary is how we create coherence. Yeah, by basically using the the the, the symbolic to paper over the real. Right. So we create a coherence. But we'll really dig into that today, and sometimes you're going to see some structures that might look really crazy, right? But as you think about them, you realize how widespread they are. Okay, so the thing about one of the reasons I chose using Lacan for this was that I could look at myself in the individual, and I could look at the political and others with the same, you know, with the same tools. So I didn't, it prevented a level of abstraction that I did not want. Yeah. Sorry, I dealt with the introduction while we were waiting. Yeah.
Excellent point. So, some keywords perhaps so that I can fit right in. I had
Mm-hmm.
to re-upload the app.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So did I miss any particular angle of approach?
No, I think I just highlighted what we had discussed. Yeah,
Mm,
for the article. And, well, not the article for the program. I'm saying that we're going to be applying the registers. All right.
yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I apologize. I may be coughing, and in order for that not to disturb the conversation, I'll be pushing the mute button very
Mhm.
often and hopefully not forgetting it too often so that I don't speak into the void.
Well, I
Alex,
already apologized for you having a cough, so it's fine.
yeah,
We,
that's
we're
fine.
we're expecting you to be here, to be coughing.
To be coughing. Alex, so the
Mhm.
subject matter I've prepared for today
Mhm.
is still and deeper and more Lacan.
Mhm.
And we've touched on the registers. We've touched on the registers and we've touched on the applicability. I would say the usableness. I don't want to say the utility because then that makes us that drives us directly into some kind of Elon Muskian type of discourse or Jeremy what's his name Bentham type of discourse. That's not where we're going with this. It's not about the utility of the tool, but it's about the applicability and the fruitfulness and the depth of insight that Lacan's instruments afford those willing to wade into his methodological territory as you have. Having said that, the geopolitical applicability of Lacan is something we've been talking about off air. Um, and we've also been talking about the applicability at the individual level. So it's at the individual, the national, and the institutional level, the collective level as well. Um, what I remember from my time at uni, that my professor in methodology might have pulled a face like this and said, "Well, that's a heavy claim. You would have to prove methodologically and with some measure of reproducibility how that claim can be made, that an instrument for the analysis of anything sociological or sociopolitical can both be applied at the individual and at the institutional level." What would you respond to that?
I would tell him that he's dealing with people, and if he thinks that at the institutional that we're not dealing with people, then maybe he can use another tool. But if we're dealing with people, then the patterns that we see people at the individual and the patterns that we see people in the interpersonal, um, we're going to see in the institutional because it's interpersonal. And the
This
fact
is
that
what
we have language, sorry, and the fact that we have language always presupposes the political because it presupposes people around you. Yeah.
Mm.
And so it what we're looking at are we're looking at we're just expanding the frame. So it's I was going to use the word scalar, but yes, it is actually scalar, right?
Let me continue on this path of playing uh, the devil's advocate or the mainstream discourse and methodologies advocate.
It suits you playing the devil's advocate, actually.
I can't laugh because then I have to cough. So yes, so the point would then be, but at the institutional level, statutes and frameworks preclude an individual's preferences setting the agenda. The agenda becomes depersonalized in an institution, which one would argue the statute makes the depersonalization of policies and politics possible. That is the nature of institutionalized collective endeavor.
You see the same pattern in the individual, in that the individual chooses their desires or or is chosen into desire by the desires that are available institutionally within a society. So it's basically the same pattern. Okay, so the same, but this it is the same pattern, but um, but built. And we're talking about the Lacanian imaginary, right? So,
Yes.
but built and constructed in different ways to fulfill different purposes. But it's the same imaginary, right? Coherence, constructing rules, etc., to protect um, people, against the anxieties that they have in their encounter with the real. Hmm.
This harkens back to one of my favorite terms that you've been using in Dystopia Unmasked. You haven't propped it up in a while, but I bring it up all the time, and that is the reflection of the context within which we live in the individual's character and fractal identities, you call it,
Hmm.
is that if you are a sadist and a sociopath, uh, and a career-oriented sociopath, you will do very well in the Third Reich, because the political system will prime you to excel with your personal tendencies. Am I understanding you correctly? Let me ask the question this way.
I think you need to remember what Hannah Arendt wrote and why people were so upset.
The banality of evil?
Yeah, Hannah Arendt was saying that basically these were fairly normal people, right?
I see
Performing,
what you're saying.
performing for under the Third Reich, right? And so they weren't monsters. And she was saying it's dangerous to think that they were monsters. Yeah.
Oh, hold on. I don't think I used the
So,
word
so I
monster.
no, no, because you're talking about sociopaths, right? So I know that that kind of psychologization has become part of Western discourse,
Mm-hmm.
and I,
Things. Mm-hmm.
I don't accept it, right? I disagree with it. That's what I'm saying.
I also refrain from pathologization. Did I even say it right? The
Yeah, you did. You
pathology.
actually you got it better than I did.
So I agree with you that um, that's an important observation. It's not a trivial issue. That in social analysis or in socio-political analysis, I become I find it very suspicious, and I find it's a limitation to accuracy and the ability to actually find out in an investigation what is going on
Hmm.
relationally, because
Hmm.
politics is essentially the domain of the relational, and
Hmm.
many things are then exchanged, many values, norms, expectations are exchanged within the relational dynamics there. So
Hmm.
once you psychopathologize an
Hmm.
actor, you you forego the insights that a study of the relational dynamics will yield, because you find
Hmm.
all of the causes, all of the reasons for whatever it is that you're studying within an actor's psychopathology,
Hmm.
rather than within a relational dynamics,
Hmm.
which have antecedents and consequences and implications. So
Hmm.
I agree with you that psychopathologization, forget it, that psychopathologizing an actor in social analysis is to limit yourself to the point of perhaps not being capable of producing uh, valuable insights.
Yeah.
All right, we agree. Now, my utilization of the term sociopath wasn't so much to stigmatize, but I really meant it clinically, sort of the clinical definition of when a human being lacks empathy, even to a minimum degree, and lacks care or concern for the well-being of other human beings as a character trait, as an agenda of their moving through the world, as a dominant priority of their mode of relating.
Okay.
Um, that has been labeled sociopathy
Okay.
medically.
I think that if we start to analyze the register, the use the registers for analysis,
Okay,
you're going to brutally see why I wouldn't do that.
let's
Like,
go. Let's.
yeah,
This is
really
very interesting
brutally
to me.
see why I wouldn't do that, right?
Yes, let's do that, please.
Okay, so I'm going to take um, the United States. You were highlighting to me Trump's the release of the Jingle Bell um, video the
Painful.
other day, right?
Hmm.
Which was about removing those illegal aliens from the United States.
Yes.
Okay, and I just want to talk about how the United States is there, not in a pathologizing way, right, which is the dominant discourse, but in the way of showing that this is actually quite normal and why it is. I mean, it's what we're reacting to is a scaling up of what they would normally do.
Hmm.
Okay, and I don't want to pathologize it at all. I want you to see how it works as a dynamic. Okay, yeah.
If you can throw in the elaborations you're about to share, if you can throw in what does it say about my um imaginary that I use the word sociopath to describe the practical enactment of the Trumpian imaginary as sociopathic. What
Because
does
we
it
want to
say?
separate ourselves from that. We want to go, that has nothing to do with us, right? This is us cleaning ourselves. But why would we need to clean? That's the question we have to ask.
So you just told
Okay.
me I have some schizoid traits.
I'm saying that you have to look at what you're cleaning. Okay. That's all I'm saying. You have to look at what you're cleaning. All right.
Hmm.
Okay, so I want to look at the United States. So the United States is this nation that is the beacon of freedom. It's the preeminent nation of the earth. It must protect peace and rule of law at all costs, etc. That's its imagination of itself, right? It is it's like they attack us because they hate our freedoms. They hate us for our freedoms, right? That's how the United States sees itself.
Hmm.
And for me, it's how does a nation see itself like that? What happens, right? Um, at the same time that it sees itself like that, when black soldiers fought in the first, they didn't even allow black soldiers to fight for them in the First World War. They gave them to France. They put them on loan to France,
Yes.
right? Because um, they couldn't, they weren't. This is the land of the free, but they could not be free enough to fight beside free white soldiers,
Yes.
right? This continued into the Second World War, right? You have to understand that for the Allies, um, that some of the strategies of those Black American regiments ended up changing the way that military strategy was taught. Okay, because they innovated. I mean, they went back to the United States, eventually to a hero's welcome, and that was it. They could get the jobs. They couldn't, The Second World War, they faced basically the same kind of thing. right? The numbers game that they needed, they actually they had didn't have a choice. They had to engage fighting black regiments because they had no choice.
Yeah.
And again, they changed the face of war, right? The Tuskegee Airmen changed the face of war. But when they went back to the United States, um, they were fighting for freedom. When they back to the United States, they deserved a lesser freedom than the others, right? They couldn't get jobs. They were civil rights issues, right? Which then they had to join into another. So how does that happen? Yeah,
Yes.
because if you've sat down and chatted with people, you'll see that people are people, right?
Yes.
Even when they're racist. Yeah, yeah. Even when they're racist, they're people, right? And that's what's uncomfortable. What's uncomfortable is that if you don't pathologize them, then what does it say about you? Yeah. So, with the United States, how does it perform that kind of double vision? After the Second World War, they finished the Second World War against the Nazis, who were supposed to be epitome of evil, and they import thousands of Nazi officers and scientists, etc., to to be absorbed into their security state, right? And then they absorb another lot uh, to provide business innovation, right? NASA was started by, or was led and started by the man who was Hitler's rocket scientist, premier rocket scientist. So how does United States how is the United States able to handle these contradictions, right? And what I would say is that because it is actually a nation founded upon mythic contradictions, things it cannot speak about. So when you can't speak about it, you can't symbolize it, right? You can't speak about it because you refuse to symbolize it, right? Uh, and and so there are two things here. What the first one about the United States, actually three things which the United States is unable to symbolize as part of its identity. The first one is the fact that they were rejected by Europe, right? They start as a group of rejects. Europe doesn't want them. Go away, right? We don't like your Christianity. We don't like you. Go away. Don't come back. Yeah,
Australia, South Africa, same.
yeah. But
Ah,
but when I've done this, I think you're going to see how the similarity in psychic structure, so different strategies for dealing with the same problem.
I,
Mhm.
Australia, South Africa, Israel, same.
New Zealand, no, not so much in New Zealand actually, not so much in New Zealand. You're right. Okay, um, so they're kicked out, and group of Puritans. So how do you deal with that? You don't, you can't own that if you own the rejection, then you have to deal with why am I rejected, right? But no, so what they have is the narrative. So they foreclose those questions. They foreclose those kinds of questionings with the name, actually in the name the Puritans. Okay, so in a way, they tell the story that the purest of Europe came out. Then one of the first early acts of this group of people is that after they arrive, they don't know how to survive in the space. The Indians take, basically save them, teach them, and then they genocide them. right? They
and
wipe them out.
and the circumstances humiliate their humanity to the point of cannibalism.
Yes. So that becomes something. There's no, you can't symbolize that. How are you gonna absorb? So they didn't absorb that into identity. So what happens is that you begin to form an identity that defends you against these things, right? That is the real of your circumstance, right? That is the real of your psychic structure, right? That is, it is real. And so you you form a defense, right? You perform psychic defense with an imaginary coherence, right? But you've only got the symbolic tools that you've got because you're part of a civilization, you have a language. So you've only got the symbolic tools that you've got. So from that, that's what going to construct your defense with. Hmm.
Say a few things about. I'm just realizing here that I've worked in the past on the construction of memory, entirely removed from the Lacan question,
Hmm.
in researching identity after violence. So after the experience of violence. So
Hmm.
could you say a few things from a Lacanian perspective under the header, the construction of memory?
Okay,
I could say more, but
that's exactly where I'm going. Yeah, that's exactly where I'm going. So because basically what the defense that you're constructing is what are you allowed to remember, and how are you allowed to remember in a way that keeps your coherence, your imaginary coherence, coherent. Yep.
who determines that?
Well, a community negotiates that.
And this is where your answer from 10, 15 minutes ago comes in again. The institutional edicts, the edicts that govern institutions were reified by individuals who agreed at a two-thirds majority, perhaps. And in order to change those principles in those edicts, you need a two-thirds majority. So the reification.
Do you see how
Yeah.
your democratic symbolization, right, is then retroactively imposed upon this community? You see, so that it forecloses what you can actually look at.
This is
You see?
absolutely
Do you
fascinating.
see?
Yeah, I see, and it's
Yeah.
really fascinating because of what it implies. It just crossed my mind that when I said two-thirds majority, the more difficult it is made to change principles of an institution, perhaps the more valuation these principles have experienced from the collective.
Okay. Okay. So you have to then put your imagination back to a group of people who arrive in ships, starving, this, that, the other, like settled in a place they're trying to live, right? You think they were going to do those kinds of things by committee? Yeah. So these things are formed in the very messy negotiation of life, right? What people bristle when you try to talk about. We did. Oh no, we're not talking about that. Don't talk about that before the children, right? So then the narrative begins to concretize. Okay. And you form an identity, and the identity is the one that you're going to remember and carry forward. That people are going, and in that, for the United States, has always been um, uh, a narrative of innocence, a narrative of being chosen, right? So hold on. Do you see how you're thrown out, but you're chosen? You're being thrown out, chose you. So that's how you defended yourself against that, right? And then the next one is that these things happen, but you're innocent. So we can't talk about them, because if we talk about them, right? So what happens is that this unsymbolized real just keeps returning as a symptom. You need to, because you're defending against um, being cast out as being chosen. You have to keep proving your chosenness. People who come in contact with you have to affirm your chosenness, right? As well as you have to keep asserting your innocence, and the people who come in contact with you have to affirm your innocence. If not, they are challenging you. This is almost like they are trying to annihilate you, right? So what you see with the United States is that this leaves it no place except a paranoid schizoid position as defense. Hmm.
This has reminded me of one of my favorite books that I think, as backgrounder to this very, very um, helpful and instructive, informative summary you've given us. The book by David Hackett.
Hmm.
David Hackett. It's called Albion's Seed. Albion's Seed. Albion
Hmm.
being used as a term to describe Britain.
Written.
Albion's Seed, Four British Folkways. And if you allow me to just inject that into the background of the conversation, because at the foreground, we are talking about the psychological structure. And
Hmm.
what you've done here is genealogically excavated a little bit the population history, a little bit, the migratory population history. You've touched on that. And Albion Seed gives us insight into just who populated the what was later to become the United States. And there's four groups mainly that David Hackett distinguishes: the Puritans, the Quakers, the Borderers, and the Cavaliers, he calls them. Um, where are they coming from in Britain? What are their attributes and specificities? And how does that influence the polity that then becomes the US? And just a summary, he says there are four main groups. The Puritans from East Anglia, they settled in New England, Massachusetts today, seeking religious purity and establishing a society based on law and community. The second group, the Cavaliers, English gentry and royalties and royalists, pardon me, and royalists from southern England, they settled in Virginia, seeking wealth and status, creating a hierarchical culture, um, and looking for aristocratic concepts of freedom, whereas the Puritans were looking for ordered types of freedom. Then the third, the Quakers from England's North Midlands, they settled in Pennsylvania in the Delaware Valley for religious freedom, promoting equality and pacifism. Then the borderers, the Scots and Irish and border English from the Anglo-Scottish frontier, who migrated to the Appalachian backcountry seeking land and freedom from authority and known for their individualism, looking for natural freedom and modes of, very conscious of modes of resistance.
Hmm. So they arrive, but they arrive at different times. So what I'm saying here is that there is a seed of American identity that ends up becoming the seed, right? And I'm putting that with the arrival of the Puritans as the first group. Yeah. Um, So, can't hear you.
Absolutely. 1629 to 1640s is the Puritans in New England.
Hmm. And then I
And the
think the next,
Cavaliers come later.
yeah,
1640s to 1670s in Virginia, the so-called first families, as they like to call themselves. And then the Quakers, 1670s to 1715s
mm,
to Pennsylvania, and the Borderers, 1715, 20-ish to
yeah.
1775.
Cavaliers are the royalists, right?
Yes, yes,
Mm.
exactly,
Okay. Yeah.
exactly. The
Yeah. So,
aristocrats.
yeah. So, so, so that's one. So then the next, so what happens is that the violence. Oh, so this kind of schizoid, paranoid um, identity that they develop,
Mhm.
right, and it becomes a way of processing the world. Then what they do is that they imagine the land contaminated. So they take the contamination which is in it, they project it outside of themselves. Okay, and as it is contaminated, it is a zone that must be purified. Okay, so that gives them the kind of proto frontier mythology structure, the proto structure of the frontier myth. Yeah,
To cleanse of savages.
yeah,
When
okay,
in fact, when in fact, I don't have the exact number, but the millions, you can see it in any
yeah.
longitudinal demographic study, the millions of natives that were killed and died because of imported diseases in the
But
United States.
no, but also by hand, right? Killed. But the point here is not
Oh,
to
by blanket even.
yeah, but that by blanket was by hand. Okay. The point here is to understand the dynamics, not so much to pathologize the dynamics, but to understand the dynamics. Okay. So what you have here is this inassimilable wound, right, at the center of American identity, which is that the the claim of a pure origin, right, the claim of chosenness cannot be interrogated, so it must be defended against, right. So it is inassimilable as symbolically, and so it keeps returning as symptom. So you always have to choose. You cyclically have to choose. You're driven to prove your chosenness. You're driven to prove your innocence. Anybody who challenges your chosenness and your innocence, you 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 must you have to clean that stain out because it's your stain.
Now, I think I mentioned this yesterday when we talked about this a little bit. Unforgettable for me, Obama's speech in January '09 when he began his presidency.
Hmm.
And in it, he was speaking beautifully as always. And then suddenly he has a passage. Let me try and find it for this conversation at some point, where he then mentions the founding fathers in the most clinically clean way that anyone could ever speak of them, as if they hadn't done what they did, as if they hadn't raped. I mean, they are the
Yeah,
founding
no, but
fathers.
you're dealing with this morally. I'm dealing with this psychologically, and what I'm saying about and this is what I would say about Obama. Obama's dad is from Kenya.
Yes,
He does not share that history.
but he enacted it that
Okay.
day.
Okay.
He
No, no. Hold on. He
Mhm.
doesn't share that history, right? He his family is what he's related to at least two presidents.
Mhm.
Okay,
Through his mother.
through his mother, right? Through his father, he's Kenyan, right? He's got Kenyan collections, and through his mother, Yeah. So um, you have to understand that that is not going to be as charged for Obama as it would be for Jesse Jackson. Yeah.
I have the exact quote.
Mm.
Our founding fathers, applause, our founding fathers, faced with perils that we can scarcely imagine, drafted a charter to assure the rule of law and the rights of man, a charter expanded by the blood of generations. Those ideals still light the world, and we will not give them up for expedience sake. I almost threw my TV out the window.
Okay. So
What are
so
you
do you
doing,
see
man?
do you see the claim of innocence and the claim of chosenness? Okay.
Mm,
If you're going to speak to any, and if you're going to politically inspire any American audience, these are two registers. These are two issues that you have to hit.
mhm,
You have to hit the issue of chosenness, and you have to hit the issue of innocence. Okay? But let me continue moving because we're not done yet. Right? So these are only so we've spoken about two of the American great inassimilable wounds, right? That they cannot symbolize, right? So one was the thing of the exile, right? And rejection. And then the next one is genocidal violence. What does it say about us? Okay, can't do that. If you try and do that with United people from United States, they 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 react aggressively, and they'll attack you. Well, hopefully verbally. Yeah. So then comes the next one, like the coup de roi, which is chattel slavery. Wealth is built by chattel slavery. And so, again, if you are chosen and you are innocent, you can't assimilate that. So then there's this whole structure in the identity of racism and so on that is designed to protect itself, right? So how do they deal with? So if you look at the way that the United States deals with blacks, is the first one is that they were a people who really needed to be purified. That's why they had them, right? So they had to civilize them, and then when they set them free, then they had to educate them because these are all purificatory imaginations. Yeah. Then yes. So if you notice, United States is is one of the most um, religious societies that you will come across. But look at the form of the of their religiosity. It is purificatory, right? Because that remains the underlying anxiety and symptom in their underneath. Yeah. So the next thing that they do is that the blacks are identified as other. So they're both inside the society but outside of it. So then they become a safety valve for the management of this symptom, right? It's a place that they can perform purification regularly, right? They can perform chosenness regularly. The fact that you are different from me and you are below me, that's chosenness. Yeah. So what we're seeing with ICE and the present immigration issue with the United States is again the manifestation of the same structuring of psyche. Okay. Yeah. Yes, yeah, yeah. So yeah, maybe we've really so then the founding fathers becomes a way of sacralizing a group and having a constitution which is a sacred document, which now gives you one suture that joins all of this together. Yeah, that of slavery, it protects against slavery, it protects it protects against what chosenness is protecting against, it protects against what innocence is protecting against. Do you see? Right, same structure, this way of metabolizing experience. So whether you're black, white, whatever, once you buy into the American identity, that is the structure that you inherit.
This is, this has reminded me of a conversation we've had on here before
Mhm.
about what came first. Because now, as we speak, of course, I'm very, very, my mind is asking, so what are the antecedents? Where are the seeds of, what are the ingredients of this mental structure, of this deep culture of chosenness, of purification, of innocence? What are the antecedents of that? Where does that come from? Where did they
Well,
get those ideas?
basically, you see that these are constructed from a Christian, a Roman Christian symbolic, right? And then a post-Roman Christian symbolic, because the Protestant symbolic is a reaction to the Roman symbolic, right? It's a purificatory attempt. It's an attempt to purify the Roman symbolic, right? The Roman Christian symbolic. So within that, all of that structures how they deal with that. So what you find is that these are psychic defense structures that Europeans tend to employ. European nations tend to employ these. Like, try to talk to the French about their their past, right? Their slave owning and their rapacious past and present in Africa, right? So it can only emerge as almost a hysteric discourse, right? So this is what you did. This is what you did, right? Because this is what you did doesn't actually begin to imagine and integrate that wound anew, right? Which is very much a depressive mode, where you go, okay, well, this is what we did. We did it. Right? How do we imagine ourselves like that? No, that will destroy the American polity. Yeah. So what you're seeing with Trump is him wielding a machine of psychic American defense. Hmm.
In your article published on September 28th of this year, The Hidden Architecture of Politics, you lay out the four categories that I just want to remind our audience of that you just briefly referenced here. There are four psychological, would you call them archetypes?
I prefer to call them the defense patterns. Yeah, but they could be. You could talk about them as archetypes. Yeah,
But,
I call
well,
them archaic. I call them archaic strategies.
archaic strategies, because I think that meets it better. Archaic strategies are born from, molded from the, at the individual level, from the experiences that you have. So it's not that somehow you find them preset and done, but as you
No, no,
experience
but
them.
no, but these are ways that infants metabolize the world.
Exactly. So these are ways that infants metabolize the world. This is how you experience the world, and the word experience is central in
Hmm.
understanding how these modes of reacting to the world come about through experience. I just want to read them. You have the depressive personality, which you mentioned here.
Hmm.
As the child grows, it begins to realize difficult truths. Yes, please.
It's not a. Do I call it a depressive personality?
No, thank you for fixing that. It says depressive positionality. I misread. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's important. A depressive positionality. As the child grows, it begins to realize a difficult truth. The same object that withholds also gives. And what once seemed purely bad also provides good. You have to cope with that. This
Yeah. So,
retrospective,
so that is foreclosed in the American psyche, in the American, yeah,
and
political psyche.
and I want to ask you something about that. This because I would say, and this is what we were talking about also a little earlier, is that
Mhm.
Lacan's instruments, as you've presented them to us, allow you to get to know yourself better if you really understand the instruments he drafts and that he outlines. You can read yourself with those instruments, and then you might, if you're good at this and if you're not in denial, understand which of these positionalities perhaps tends to dominate in your imaginary. Um,
No, no, it dominates in the way that, yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. Yeah.
in the way that you negotiate reality.
No, no, imaginary was right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all right. So the depressive positionality produces a retrospective recognition that awakens both guilt and the capacity for reconciliation. I mentioned the others that you work out here: the schizoid positionality and the paranoid positionality. And then there is also the opacity positionality. And you can find very detailed, specific, and instructive elaborations by Alex in The Hidden Architecture of Politics From Psyche to Cosmology, published on Dystopia Unmasked, September 28th, 2025. And here's my question. I have a tendency to see the depressive positionality mode of coping with the complexity of reality, where there is good and there is bad, and there is hurtful and there is pleasurable, there is harmony and disharmony, and you have to at all times cope with both. There is rejection and there is acceptance. Your ex wife is a horrible person, but by God, the good days were good. So, how do you? So, I feel the depressive positionalities when you merge your I think that the depressive positionalities that knows how to balance the good and the bad is a sign of more maturity. This is my qualification of it. Tell me about what and that leads to, if I connect this to what you just said before, that leads to me being very uh is a beautiful word, having a lot of floxy noxy nihili pilification for the disdain is just a long word for disdain for the official US position, which simply doesn't have the ability to do this balancing.
But
And I find it
yeah.
immature. I find it immature. And please make an assessment of what I've just
Okay.
done.
So first of all, you really have to understand how um these kinds of genealogies happen.
Hmm.
Um, on terms that allow you to grasp the dynamics, because you're going to be dealing with the dynamics. You're going to not be dealing with what you think should happen. So I think that often those kinds of attitudes, they rob you of strategic range. Yeah. So you need to know what people will do, how they will do it, and what their structure is.
regardless of whether it's mature or immature.
Regardless of whether you think it's mature or immature. Okay. What we're dealing with here is the is the traumatic content and intensity of the wound. Okay, which differs with different nations. So, like, if to survive, you had to eat your compatriots. You're talking about that. You know what I mean?
Some things you will take to the grave.
Yeah, it's something you can't talk about it. So that community doesn't have a chance to symbolize it, to discuss it, to integrate it. Right? They can't create an imagination about it. It that is foreclosed. Right? So what happens is that every time in the United States, when they try and deal with their race issues, right? They start doing it, and then there's panic. There's basically moral panic, because what you're doing is you're you're just scratching away at the wound, right? And there's a point at which, what are you saying? If you're saying that, then are you saying that our ancestors were bad? Right? What are you saying about the founding fathers? What are you saying about the Constitution? Right? The whole thing collapses. Oh no! Right? No. So that's the kind of so that's what you're seeing. Right? That's what Obama provoked. Right? And so here comes Trump. Trump is the classic hysteric. Ah, no, 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 they did that. Ah, no, no, no. Right? Yeah. And but what's Trump doing now? Trump is performing the purification rituals.
Allow me to give you Trump verbatim.
Hold on. You're performing the first right? The first perform purification ritual. He started imagining was the wall. Yeah. Then his second one is now the removal of the stain, the expulsion of the stain. Yeah. Then they face the challenge of China as a peer competitor, because the United States cannot. The peer competitor annihilates their sense of chosenness, right? Because if there's somebody equal to them, then they can't be chosen. That's annihilation, right? So they reflect, so they respond to that as they have to remove that which will annihilate them, which will annihilate them, their symbolic chosenness. Yeah, okay, let me step back.
I just had a moment of understanding, and I hope I'll get back to it for a question. So here, just 6 hours ago today, Donald J. Trump posted on his social media platform, which I've ignored. I was mentioning to you that I've made a mistake, a cardinal mistake. The mistake of the vegetarian criticizing the taste of chili con carne. You can't say much about something that you have no experience of. And I have absolutely no experience of that social media platform that Trump runs. And yet, that's where he projects all his visions and personal views and things into a following of, I don't know how many follow him on that account. So there is politics going on that people who call themselves analysts simply have no idea about what is being communicated. And I jumped in there today when I picked up that Venezuela was going to be subject to a full out blockade to see what Trump has been posting. And this morning he posted, Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. Surrounded. It will only get bigger, and the shock to them will be like nothing they have ever seen before. until such time as they return to the United States of America all of the oil, land, and other assets that they previously stole from us. The illegitimate Maduro regime is using oil from these stolen oil fields to finance themselves drug terrorism, human trafficking, murder, and kidnapping. For the theft of our assets, and for many other reasons, including terrorism, drug smuggling, and human trafficking, the Venezuelan regime has been designated a foreign terrorist organization.
Okay.
Therefore, I am ordering a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela. The illegal aliens and criminals that the Maduro regime has sent into the United States during the weak and inept Biden administration are being returned to Venezuela at a rapid pace. America will not allow criminals, terrorists, or other countries to rob, threaten, or harm our nation, and likewise will not allow a hostile regime, hostile in capital, to take our oil, land, or any other assets, all of which must be returned to the United States immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America.
Okay. So do you see how that is psychically ordered? Okay. It is cyclically ordered here. So first of all, the Trump performs. Would you like to analyze that actually?
Oh, well, no, let's do it together, and I'd leave the floor to you first because this stuff is, uh, I mean, okay, Lacanian. Should I try my new Lacanian
Yeah, yeah,
insights?
yeah. Please try with Lacanian.
Oh Lord, let me see what what
But
am I even dealing
what
with?
I've given you some tools, right? So
Yes.
yeah, let's play with the tools.
So what we're seeing here is is so the purificatory thing comes in the part about where I quote. So let me just use the terms, the concepts, and identify the substance to the concept. So
Mhm.
purification is about uh, illegal aliens and criminals have to be, and the Maduro regime. So he identifies contaminants, illegal aliens, criminals, the Maduro regime afar. And then he also identifies the Biden administration as a contaminant, as a vector that brought in the contaminants. So there's an epidemiological thing going on here, even. Um, Biden administration as a vector for the illegal aliens and criminals. Hmm. You mentioned earlier in one of our conversations that the word alien isn't well innocent or is a pregnant term. One would have to look into that signifier. So that rings a bell, of course. So criminal terrorists, other countries to rob, threaten, or harm our nation. Rob, threaten, harm. In one of our previous sessions, we spoke of the neologism the that they created by speaking of narco-terrorist state and imputing to Venezuela that it was poisoning the US body politic. So there is, of course, this narco-terrorist poisoning discourse.
Okay, but do you see how it's all about contaminant discourse?
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely there. And he says to threaten, harm, rob. We will not allow a hostile regime to take our oil, land, and assets. What is that? There's a political economy there too, a
Okay.
strong one.
So 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 do you see here how the American almost frontier myth becomes so the symbology of the frontier myth becomes transposed to um, Venezuela. So Venezuela is a zone which is now inhabited by by illegal barbarians who need to be purified
Yeah.
in order to claim what is theirs. That's exactly the logic that saw the United States taking the West, etc.
And the discourse is very what's that actor, the Western actor? Uh there's this narrative about how Westerns really are an artistic expression of this dualistic dichotomizing worldview, of this polarizing worldview that is so typically expressed here.
Yeah, 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 and that characterizes American literature. Right? You get somebody like Arthur Miller in The Crucible exploring it quite there. Right? So that this is McCarthyism, right? But it's another kind.
Yes.
It's the same grammar. It's the same symbolic grammar.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay.
You know,
So I think you can see now. I think you can see what has been being done on Dystopia Unmasked over the last 2 years.
yes, definitely. It's definitely there. Um, I'm trying to see. So I've gone off on a little tangent and I'm looking for the origin of the Western phrase, this town ain't big enough for the both of us. Uh, sorry, which posits a dichotomy, which posits dualism, which posits a polarization which is unsurmountable, which posits the anti-depressive positionality.
Hmm.
This town ain't big enough for the both of us. Uh, uh,
It's a schizoid paranoid position.
right? This particular hemisphere ain't big enough for the both of us to live. So, what do we do with this? This is in terms of politics. So we have this psychological. Let me ask about change. This is fascinating because
Okay, so basically, what I'm saying
yes,
is that the United States is a polity. That is how it metabolizes the world. To change,
yeah,
it will collapse as a polity. That's who they are. Yeah.
wow. Oh my God, this is so much here. Um, so I'm a trained conflict transformation specialist. What
Hmm.
is this a mouthful? What is that? What that is through mediation, bring parties to irreconcilable conflicts, parties enmeshed in irreconcilable conflicts, to recognize the legitimacy as well as the illegitimacy of whoever they're interacting with is goal pursuit and values for the purpose of of motivating them, for lack of a better word, to embrace that which is legitimate about the other and to transform and undo by nonviolent means that which is illegitimate, perceived as illegitimate, whether subjectively or objectively illegitimate, in the counterpart's objectives. That, in a nutshell, is what conflict transformation practice is aimed at. When I listen to this, I have this job description at the back of my mind. Okay, so now you want to take all of the oil coming to and going out of Venezuela. Uh, the case you make is not very convincing for the legitimacy of that act. It's not exactly convincing. You might have to prioritize doing this to Colombia before you do it to Venezuela in terms of where the stuff that you're complaining about is coming from. You might have to perhaps do what you're saying, which is you're talking about criminals and so extrajudicial, basically, um, actors within your territory. Well, then you might have to work on reflexive institutions that produce criminal actors within your territory, and the Central Intelligence Agency might know a thing or two about such actors.
Okay.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation might know a thing or two about such actors. And so there is, oh yes, now I have, so I have something going on here. There is a foreclosure of self-reflection. There is a foreclosed self-reflection dimension going on in this positionality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my job has been to identify the foreclosure of self-reflection, to gently create an opening there for the self-reflection in order to generate in the process of that self-reflection compassion and empathy, not in bulk for your antagonist, but for the legitimate pursuits of your antagonists, and a readiness, a willingness to deal with that which you perceive as illegitimate in your antagonist, to transform it to an acceptable degree. Now, that's the job. That's the job of a mediator, of a conflict transformation trained mediator. There are many different modes of mediation, but this particular one, you have people like Lederach, who's an expert on that. He's a Mennonite, might, kind of Quakerish Mennonite type philosophy there. So these modes of looking at the world, I've learned through you that is the depressive positionality. But so many questions arise, Alex.
Great. So here's your problem with the United States.
Hmm.
That the structure, and this is not only of the United States, but this is the thing about national identities, that bec- because the identity is a way of managing that wound, unless you change that way of managing, then what has to happen is
Hold
that
on, hold on, hold on. Please say the sentence: identity is a way of managing wounds in two, three
that
different ways.
central wound. So what we're saying is that the identity. So in the case, I'm going to use the United States again. In the case of being thrown out, right, as exile becomes chosenness, right? Chosenness forecloses any kind of symbolic um, metabolism of that process, interidentity. It's a shield against that, right? Then we also dealt with the thing of genocide and innocence. So with African, so that gets repurposed for chattel slavery, right? So what happens here is that if you challenge that, they experience that as symbolic annihilation, right? So so basically, what you may succeed in doing is moving their attention from that, but that's how they metabolize the world. It's just going to turn on something else, right? So basically, the United States was turned on China, right? It was ratcheting it up on China. Rare earth minerals came up. Can't do it. Hard pivot to Venezuela. It needs a place to perform its purificatory rituals.
Please hold on to this, but I want to come in harshly and say, but you are essentializing them.
I'm saying that I'm not saying that every American is like that.
Hmm.
I'm saying that that is the structure of American identity. of American collective identity. That is how the American collective identity metabolizes the world in order to result in a unified identity. So anybody who departs from that begins to enter the space of the other. And alien comes from the Latin alias, which means other, another, a foreigner. Yeah. So
Um,
alienus is belonging to another or a foreigner, but
okay.
alias is other. Okay. So once you begin to become the other, so the academics who have been through critical theory coming up against this, they have now become the locus of that purificatory performance.
You have just summarized. This is fascinating. You've just given uh, a compendium of the psychological assessment of a clinical psychoanalyst, Jordan Peterson. You know, I
I don't
found it.
comment on Jordan Peterson. I'm sorry.
No, but
It's not.
no.
No,
This is,
if I did, it would look unkind.
you see.
So I just don't. I just shut up. Yeah.
No, but this is, you see, as you were speaking, I was trying to see who, where, and Jordan Peterson became more and more in focus in my mind as, but it's him. It's him. The whole discourse
No,
position that he holds is that.
yeah. That's that's
And
that's often my problem with psychology.
mm,
That's often my problem with psychology as opposed to psychoanalysis. Yeah.
mm. And well, anyway, where did I want to go initially with my interruption? So yes, so sorry for interrupting you, but so one thing that I would like you to sort of juggle with a little bit at this point of the conversation is, all right, I understand you're not sort of you are speaking of a higher level integration at the collective level of what the identity of the US is. And the implication of that response you gave me is quite heavy because now we are talking about empiricism. This psychostructural positionality is born out of experience, is born out of history as it happened. So it's born out of the experience of the people that were expelled from Albion. That whole trauma over there, the Irish with the famine and the poisoned potatoes and the get out of this territory and the dispossession. Pardon me.
Remember that happens much later.
That happens in the 18th, right? 18th century.
Yeah, that happens much later.
Okay, so thank you, thank you. Let
So
me
it's
fix my.
already formed by then.
Oh yeah. Okay, so it's much earlier. In any case, it's much earlier. This is after Lutheranism.
We're talking about 1600s.
We're talking about the 1600s, the late 16th century, the 17th century. That's what we're talking.
1600s, 1700s, right? So the
Okay.
17th and 18th century we were talking about.
Okay. So that period, and we've talked about this in other conversations as well, because we have the 30-year war in the 1600s. We're coming out of, pardon me?
Okay, no, go on.
And we're coming out of Luther and Calvin and all these Protestants being slaughtered and killed and running away and running off to South Africa and running to the New World and sailing and clinging onto the Old Testament, etc., etc., etc. In all of this, when we get to 2025, the reason why I say what you've said here is so heavy is because my input right here would be, oh, but certainly something can be done, Alex. Certainly progressives, or I don't even want to use the word progressive because it's tainted by political discourse, but people who are willing to admit to the to the ugliness of one's own deeds in the past in order to overcome it. You enslaved people, you genocided people, you've polluted stuff, you've stolen land from Mexico. All of these things that, as a collective polity, we have definitely done and aren't really good things. In order to, and this is the depressive positionality speaking through me, in order to embrace all this ugliness that we are responsible for and atone for them. Atonement. Yes. Thank you for the patience of letting me speak so long. Um, Atonement. Where does atonement happen in this discourse? Otherwise, aren't we essentializing?
So where does that where do you, where is the symbolic origin of your imagination of atonement?
Give me a secular term then.
I'm asking you. No, I'm asking you because you said it, and so it has a symbolic genealogy. I'm just asking you where it came from.
It's Abrahamic religious Christian.
Okay, it's a
And
Christian.
but it's
So
for
it's a
lack of
Christian framing. No, no, no. It's a Christian framing. Okay, it's a
but
secularized Christian framing. That's all I wanted to say. Okay, and because the way that you, in order to imagine going beyond, that's how you have done it.
I'm trying.
Okay, I'm saying to you, this is what I'm saying to you, that whenever you begin to interrogate those three zones, right? And right, so the three zones of American complicity, you excite American anxiety. And once you excite the American collective anxiety, it has a way of metabolizing that. First, it will listen, then it will react defensively, right? And when once it's reacting to react defensively, its way is to eliminate the stain, to disembowel the stain, and because the American aggressive um, language patterns are always they're based upon two things: annihilation and disembowelment, right? Um, so that's how these are patterned. So that you can see right now that they're trying to annihilate critical theory from or any critical analysis, etc. They're trying to annihilate it from the discourse. They've
That
had enough.
was what's his name? The speech, the vice president's speech in Europe about
Mhm.
the academics being the enemy.
Yeah, but
The
now they've
academics are.
excited the American. If the Americans take that on, they experience that as being annihilating because they can no longer perform chosenness or innocence. Right. So basically, what they're trying to do now is to stabilize the field so that they can continue to perform chosenness and innocence, because that is necessary to that is what roots the American identity. The American identity is a system designed to protect those things. That's what the wound. They're protecting against the wound.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So so that your attempt to inspire, and it's also partly necessary. That's why I call it a symptom, right? Lacan calls it a symptomatic, because the real of this thing is there, so it's never not there. So what happens is that they come closer to it. That's American history, right? So the periodicity of this is your predictive matrix for American history.
And I just realized, I just understood what my question actually is. So the question that I want to ask you brings us back to this classification of the positionalities. And whether the classification is exhaustive or not is another question open for anyone who's thinking about these instruments to work with and work on and expand and improve. But that being said, when we have the depressive positionality, the schizoid positionality, the paranoid positionality, and the opacity positionality,
Mm-hmm.
my current position in this conversation, I'm noticing it and I'm making it explicit. I'm thinking because of the dangers that the schizoid positionality poses for the lives of whoever they label an alien. And I'm thinking of Iraq. From 1990 to 2025, over 6 million people were killed because they were perceived as a threat in Iraq when the threat could not be proven. I'm speaking from 1990 all the way through to 2003 and beyond.
Okay.
And sub-Saharan Africa is now in the line of fire of the schizoid logic of NATO members. And these countries, these polity actors, are brutally armed to the teeth and are a threat for the well-being and livelihood of peoples all across planet Earth.
Okay. Okay. I think that. Okay. So I'm not in, but I think it was part of what was not fair about this analysis, which dug quite deeply into the United States, is I did not dig deeply into another actor, and I did that because of time, right? Because then what you would have seen is that all actors are shaped, their identities are built around a wound, a foreclosure, etc.
Do you want to quickly, perhaps,
Because it's now 11:35. I don't want to do that.
very
Okay,
well, because you've done
so
it. You've done it in writing, and it can be found. It can be found on the page in the archives of Dystopia Unmasked.
yeah,
And you've improved even on what you've written, but that hasn't been published yet.
yeah. So there's Thucydides trap, which
Yeah.
is one of them in which I explore this, right? Um, so so all I'm saying here is that I was just describing the contours, right? The constraints of the American coherence. How do they metabolize the world, right? And other actors are also metabolizing the world. And what this allows us to understand is how will we expect actors to act? So one of the things I'm saying here is that all European states tend to perform innocence and chosenness, right? Different, but they express that very differently. And I think that my conclusion about that is that it comes out of the fact that they're all of a Christian symbolic.
I have a question, and it's an important one, because as a first of all, in the past few weeks, the kinds of things that we've been talking about here have, in the past few weeks, been declared as disqualifiers for permits to visit that territory. So, this kind of conversation, which is a strictly exploratory conversation about the ways of the world, has already been qualified by the powers that be as exclusionary talk. It's important. So,
Mm-hmm.
the way we move in reality as individuals uh, relates us to the punitive, decontaminatory practice of the schizoid actor that is the US.
And I'm saying that that's not hard. I mean, that's basically what happened with Malcolm X. Malcolm X was talking about, look, these are the things underneath, and we have to clean that up. And so they
So,
killed
thank you very much for bringing up Malcolm X because now I can better articulate my question.
sorry, and
The-
Martin Luther King.
exactly. My question is under which circumstances? Because at this point, I feel threatened in my day-to-day ability to just use my brain and converse about the things that are in the world. There's a prohibition of conversing about the things that the US embodies and enacts. There's been a prohibition. You can't talk freely, and if you talk freely, suddenly you become a target. And I find that to be cause enough for me to wonder about under which circumstances does this murderous, exclusionary, discriminatory rigidity of that position change? And when you
Uh,
mention,
that's not going to change. That's what once there's listen, once this actor becomes anxious, this is what is going to happen.
but you mentioned Martin Luther King, and in 1963, the Civil Rights Act was passed,
Hmm.
63 to 65, and that is a fundamental transformation of the expulsory impulse of the schizoid character. And in the same way, in 15, I don't know when it was, I think
Okay.
1515 in Europe, uh, the Augsburg Peace, was it 1515 or 30, something like that? They integrate the Protestants into the polity. So under certain circumstances, a kairos is observed in history
Okay.
where does it always have to be bloody?
Okay. So you get to the point where there is some symbolic exhaustion, and a society may transition to another way of metabolizing.
Ah.
Okay. But here's what I'm going to say:
Hmm.
that the civil rights successes
Mm.
led to the development of directly led to things like the development of American SWAT teams and and very peculiar kinds of militarized policing in black communities.
Counterintelligence surveillance.
Yeah, that's what it led to. Okay, so I'm saying that you have to understand the role of those anxieties
And the
and the
permanence of
way
them.
that yeah, and because this is the way this actor is metabolizing the world. Okay, so what so often what happens is that it shifts the goal, and because they cannot change that, then what you get these points at which you get swing back, right? It's like you're pulling the elastic, right? And then boom, right, and then it goes to the opposite. So you get this eternal oscillation. So you get civil war, the setting of slaves free, or right, that liberation, and then what happens at that whatever, I can't remember, emancipation, and then you get you get swing back, right? Which, what do they call it? What's that period they call it? Redemption, right? So and then you get things like the Ku Klux Klan, etc. So that you have to understand what I'm saying is that these psychic this psychic structuring is structuring of history. That's all I'm saying. Okay, and you have to understand that. And so also you cannot be under the illusion that without the changing of the symbolic structure, which also means that you have to change the identity structure. And so if you approach an identity structure that can only process those kinds of changes as annihilatory, then that's what you're dealing with. If you think you're going to win that fight, good luck to you. Okay. And sorry, because of time now, I think we have to begin to wind down, but we haven't answered any of the questions. We haven't interrogated any of the questions. So I don't know if you could just run through and let's start engaging with that. My apologies, people, for just having can't hear you.
Let me start from the bottom and we move up. The counter on Twitter says, look forward to the next exchange. Best wishes, Alex and Meticulous Prime. Thank you so much for joining us today. Mm, mm. Then we have Salim. Is this American chosenness and innocence of it being hero acting without a conscience, commonly called a villain, the schizoid personality? Alex, would you like to react to that?
Okay. So often, what will happen when you process in this way is that you have to produce the archetypical villain and hero, and then
Ah,
that is enacted. So you'll see that within the American imaginary, that the one who annihilates the stain is the hero, right? So it's very celebratory of violence to annihilate the stain, whether the stain is outside, right, or the stain is inside. Okay, that is part of what Lacan would call the jouissance, the celebratory violence of the Ku Klux Klan or lynching, right? etc. That's part of that structure, or the way that um, Iraq or Afghanistan were imagined, right? And you can see that in movies, right? What was that movie where Leonardo DiCaprio was an intelligence officer in Iraq? I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter, right? So you can see that. So I'm giving you some tools. You can actually just go look at the movies, right? Um, what was that called? Meeks. What was that movie I talk about? Meeks.
maybe Syriana or
No, Syriaca. Yeah. No, that's no, not that one. Um, and Meeks. Oh God, what's it? Kelly Reinhardt, man. Anyway, Kelly Reinhardt has a movie that I like. Meeks something. Go look for it. If you go on Google and you go Meeks dot dot dot, it'll tell you right. Kelly Reinhardt. Um, um, and
Meeks cut off.
Meeks cut off. Yeah. Uh, so I'm saying that if you look at it, right, the American anti-hero who's going around, he's the annihilating the criminal stain, right? All of this, the United States needs these register. It needs these sites at which it can keep performing that, which then gives it something to assuage that anxiety. That's what I'm saying. Okay. And so the one who performs that is the hero. So if you look at its military culture, right, about service, etc., you'll see that that's all embedded in there. Okay, is that
This
answer
is
that one?
so the villain, and this is very powerful stuff because now you have to look at who the villain considers a villain, right? So you see that
What,
Julian
what,
Assange,
what, what we're doing here is we're looking at these symbolic positionalities.
exactly.
So it's like you have to leave. You really have to leave your moralizing, or you will not be able to speak.
Oh, you
Right?
at this point in the way I'm functioning, I sort of have to. Uh, I always retroactively apply Lacan to my current mode of thought,
Mm-hmm.
and I see what they did to Julian Assange
Mm-hmm.
as in. I mean, what's her name? Hillary Clinton wanted him dead, wanted him killed.
Yes. Stain. Right.
Right,
I am a stain. Me. Okay, Americans, I'm a stain.
my lord. So, but there's so much going on now from this vantage point onto that polity, its peoples and institutions.
Yeah.
The amount of tensions currently afoot in that polity, the intensity of the tensions in that polity. Because you have, I don't remember if it was 63 or 65 million people that voted for Trump, or was it more that voted for Trump?
Okay.
So there, pardon me?
No, go on.
So let us say that is a metric to assess, and that's those that went actively and actively voted for the man. So how many millions actually stand for this?
I don't look for it. I don't look at it like that. I'm not
No,
interested in those numbers.
but it's a
I'm interested.
quantification.
I'm interested in the volume of anxiety that I can hear in the literature, in the speeches. I'm listening for the anxiety because those anxieties tell me more about how that actor is going to act than those numbers.
Something is clicking. So, ah, hmm. But the Green Party. Say a few words about the Green Party in the midst of that context in that country.
No, I think we're going through the
Okay,
message.
all right. Because the Green Party also exists. So, Yusuf Ahmad says,
Yeah, but the Green Party becomes a locus of anxiety. It excites the anxiety, right? In the imagination that a neoliberal state can deal with climate change, right? In the im- that is just a locus of anxiety. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I don't want to go there. Please read people's comments.
very, very complex.
Yeah.
Truly amazing. The structure, the framework, the gradual steps from A to B to C to D. I'm very much looking forward to it, says Yusuf Ahmad. And I have, oh, hold on a second. All right. Alex, this part 1 to 3 is amazing, and I'm very much excited to read your work and your book. Salim picked up or projected into the conversation the two terms group cohesion. Would you like to react to any of these?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Exactly. So, in group, out group cohesion, definitely. The counterintuitive wrote any enclosure or so called nations which have fossil fuels under their ground are so screwed because they all will do the same thing. There is no choice but to extract or devalue nature. Would you react to that?
The show must go on. That's the point. The show must go on. And if you have what the show needs to go on, then and it's yours, and you're not going to take don't ask for too much for it, right, etc. Because the show must go on.
First. You were touching on the rare earths of China and the humiliation China dealt to the US, and I kind of interrupted you. This is a fitting place, perhaps, to round off that point I interrupted you on.
Nah, I think we're okay. I was okay with
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Okay. So, Salim says Dystopia Unmasked developing formulas, the frontier myth, which variables can be visualized with likely outcomes to current affairs. The variables on the frontier myth can be visualized with likely outcomes to current affairs.
Yeah. So what happens is that another part of the American imagination, right, is that they so you get the frontier myth in territory, but you get the frontier myth in science, right? And often the frontier myth in science performs as a fetish for new beginnings, right? So you want a new beginning. You want to come and initiate something new that is going to resolve all the tensions of the old. Right? so it becomes a zone of the projection of utopias, right? Of utopian visions. So that's why Elon Musk's Mars project is feels so promising. AI right? It's going to revolutionize the society, right? So what's happening now is that people are beginning to lose belief in that promise, and so then the anxieties come. So you need another zone, which so Venezuela is the zone on which that is being performed.
Elon Musk, man, the his chosenness thing for Western civilization, his chosenness view on Western civilization is massive. So, writes Yusuf Ahmad, so they are analogizing the literal disease and health through the metaphorical and making it purificatory. Disease is and health is, and there is no in between. There is disease and we are health. So they must declare their war on them in order to preserve their health.
Yep,
This,
on the button.
you know, and this is a Lacanian point of view. And I can imagine at this point, some of my friends or some of the other people I talk about, but you don't need Lacan for this. The political economy of imperialism perfectly does the job. But Lacan also does the job. That's the point here.
Well, I challenge them. I mean, I've been at this for years, right, for over 30 years, and yeah, I find Lacan indispensable, right, for seeing the structure of things which you think, because what people will go is say, this is so irrational. I don't know why they do that, right? And I'm going, yeah, this is why they do that.
That's the point. That's the point. And I mean, I get it now. I get it now. But I'm always tempted because of the way I've been programmed, the way I've been educated, indoctrinated, to always say, but that is uncomfortably close to essentialization.
Well, I don't know. If you think so, I'm not going to argue against that. I'm going to continue looking at the situation and reading it strategically, because I come from those people who who tend to be some of the first to die.
That's
Right? I
exactly.
can't afford that. I can't afford that imagination. Right? I look at some of the positions some of the people I grew up with have taken, and they've just passed it on. They've just passed the same situation on to their children, and they have not contributed anything towards the changing of that. And I, I mean, I'm not. I couldn't spend my life like that. That was me. I could not spend my life like that.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, and I'm not saying that as to say that I'm better than them. I just couldn't spend my life like that.
It's an observation,
Yeah,
simply,
and
simply an observation.
yeah, and so all I'm saying is that we, we have to read what happens, even if it's uncomfortable, right? Because when people are dying in Gaza or wherever, or in the inner cities of the United States, right, or ISIS coming, or in the 70s and the 80s, when we'd have to go and camp out in front of police stations in Britain to keep black youth alive, right? That that is not comfortable, right? Can't have we can't have that, don't have that security of innocence. So yeah. So I recognize that I'm willing to confront that deep um that the deep discomfort and anxiety, scratching issues, right? Because of my historical positioning, right? I get it. Yeah, please, some more questions, and then we're gonna done two more, and then we're done.
Salim says, because they transfer their measure of performance from themselves to the state as a responsibility of social conscience, thereby selling their soul, which lacks the ability to transform empathize with the changing times?
I I think that this, what we have to see here is that this is structuring. Okay, it's structuring. So once you're in that, it's structuring. So I don't take it as individual pathology. I take it as structuring, and then you get and out of it arise certain types of possibilities for standing against it. Okay, and that is going to happen. Okay, but what we see is that without rupture in identity, it cannot be truly transformative. That's all I'm saying. Right? There's a point. The only way, so that the only way that the United States can deal with this is to no longer be the United States. Okay. Yeah. And at this point, that's not likely.
Yes.
All right. One more
So,
question and then I'm done. Or one more observation and
um,
then I'm done.
let me
So just
see.
choose, go through and choose a really interesting one.
No, actually, we're almost through. The ones preceding this one we've already looked at. Nature is not an asset, writes the counterintuitive. Now, be it Washington or Caracas, the devaluation of nature in favor of fossil capital remains above all else.
Um, Western discourse metabolizes the world as resource and asset. Okay. And that's how the political machine or the economic machine metabolizes through its way, right? So I'm not saying it's right. All I'm saying is that's how it works.
That's the point. That's the
And
point.
and when we protest against it in this way, what we're doing is we're asking it to change. Often it cannot change. Okay. So this is why I often talk about yeah, or we have to look to see, but we have to look to see how that change affects its psychic structure to understand what's possible and what's not. Okay. And there are times when it, as Negri and Hart talk about Exodus, you really you can't, there's nothing you can do within that structure. So you gotta go do something else.
Mhm. This has been extremely enriching, very insightful, and to me, a key word in all of this, a key vector of the formation of the psychostructural positionality, be it schizoid, paranoid, depressive, or opaque.
Mhm.
A vector of that is experience, correct so far?
Mhm.
And therefore, it sort of seems to me to stand to reason
Mhm.
that a variable and vector and factor for change of trajectory would be an experience that brings about that change or that alteration of trajectory, whether or not I want it to be the case or not. I,
Mhm. Go on, sorry.
and it's sort of an insight that is kind of dawning on me from this conversation. Whether you want the change in the positionality to come about or not is secondary. Experience modifies and sediments over time into the positionality.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Here's what I would say. There's a point of
Mhm.
symbolic exhaustion at
Yes.
which the 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 system becomes so overloaded with anxieties
Hmm.
that people see the impossibility and they really stop believing. in that metabolic machinery in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then they begin to look for something else, right? So they begin to make changes. So this naturally begins to happen, right? Now, whether we're there yet, but what we're seeing within some place like the United States is that they're hitting these critical masses, and as they hit those critical masses, there's a critical mass of people who 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 are willing to criticize, right? But so what we're seeing right now is a system which is quite unstable because of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So and so what we're seeing is an attempt to by Trump and those people is to reestablish some kind of stability, right? But it's just
Yes.
actually making the thing even more unstable. So that tells you that we're at a change. Approaching a change point, right? Now, if you're going to imagine that change point is going to happen in a non-violent way, I say, well, open your eyes and have a look and see if that's what you're seeing.
Yes. What's the word for this? Ah, there's a word I'm looking for. The
Mm-hmm.
the word is not coming up. It doesn't matter. I have some closing words,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which perhaps to open the whole conversation again, which is I remembered in listening to you today talk about the purificatory impetus in the imagination of the U.S., talking about the centrality of the innocence of the self and the centrality of the chosenness discourse, the fundamental function of the experience of being exiled and rejected in statu nascendi for the people that ended up populating that territory from Europe, the genocidal violence that ensued, the decontamination through genocide of the so-called savages, the implementation for 10 generations of slavery, which is the abuse and denigration of other humans for 10 entire generations, 250 to 280 years. Um, all of that is sort of constitutive of the psychostructure of the actor that the US is. And you've done this kind of work not only for the US, you've done it for China, you've done it for Turkey, and there is not any of the macro political polities on planet Earth, 193, 94,
Mm-hmm.
as they are, to which this methodology cannot be applied. Point one. And to close this off, so that would be my effort at summarizing what we've discussed today, that
Mm-hmm.
Lacan allows you to strip bare the psychostructure of an actor and to see the vectors that drive, the force motrice that drive the actors at the psychological level. And that is, I just want to use the word beautiful, but maybe another word would be better suited. And I was reminded, since we've been talking about using the word innocence so much, of a quote by Donald when he was asked by, I think, Fox News is, what's his name? Um, Bill O'Reilly. He was asked, what do you, he was asked um, a question by Bill O'Reilly about Putin. And then Trump answered, what do you think? You think our country is innocent? You think our country is so innocent? Our country isn't innocent. And I think somehow that tells us that these psychostructures don't happen in ignorance. They also happen quite clearly, not just only in the unconscious,
Yeah.
but in the case of Trump, at least, when he says, what
But,
do you
no,
think?
but he's saying that like symptom, right?
He said,
Because no, he's saying it by symptom. He's you see, because the structure of Trump is that we're not innocent, but we are.
come again, come again, come again.
The structure of Trump is that we're not innocent, but we are.
Because he says there are a
Called the
lot of
survivor.
killers. We've got a
No,
lot
no,
of killers.
no. I'm saying that he'll say that, but he'll perform. But then in the next say he'll perform that they are innocent. So
Yes.
this is we call this disavowal.
The
Right.
disavowal
So
and the default.
because there's this wound in the real, and it keeps returning. It's there. It's just circulating.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it produces these symptoms. So these are the symptoms, right? It is, but it's
Excellent.
not. Da 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 da. Right. That's what's going on. It just keeps surfacing.
Excellent. So we've touched on two terms in this conversation that
Mm.
are central to the Lacanian methodology: disavowal and the symbolic exhaustion. We don't have to go into them now, but just for our audience to pick them up and look them up: disavowal, foreclosure, and symbolic exhaustion that play a role. So yes,
All right.
default fallback position is the schizoid paranoid.
Well, the schizoid paranoid positionality usually arises when there is the significant traumatic core which challenges the view of the view of the self, and can't maintain coherent view of the self as you would like.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. Listen, I think it's after 12. It's been a long session. Yeah. I'm gonna go and sit down, have a thing, and smoke my pipe.
Thank you very much for taking the time today. I invite everybody to join Dystopia Unmasked. Invite more people who would be interested in this kind of discourse, these kinds of insight. Now you know what is under the hood, what is in the engine, one of the elements in the forming the engine of Dystopia
Mm.
Unmasked cognitive processing tools. It is Lacan viewed through Alex's Caribbean Creole Fanon's perspective, and it leads us straight to Lacan. Thank you very much, Alex, for taking the time. Thank you for the 23 people that are still in here, despite this probably being the longest, one of our longest sessions. And hope to speak next Wednesday with all of you when it is time for Dystopia Unmasked, speaking about the oddities of the world that we live in from a structural and dispassionate point of view.
All right. Okay. Well, bye and salams, because I'm seeing a lot of salams in the thing and so on. And see you guys next week. We're going to continue with Lacan. So see you next week.
Thank you indeed.